we're not meant to use the word flash-shaming because it's not body positive, but at the same time, I'm a feminist, but... Hello, I'm Deborah Frances-White. You may know me from the Guilty Feminist podcast. I've also written a book called The Guilty Feminist, available in bookshops everywhere. I am also a stand-up comedian and screenwriter, and this is my life in objects. So my first object, now you may notice I'm wearing a charm necklace, and all of these things, I designed this myself. It's patriarchal jewellery. It was a Victorian guard chain worn by a Victorian gentleman, and they used to wrap these chains around themselves, and it was the sort of, I suppose, a way of keeping their watch safe, but also ostentatiously demonstrating their gold. So I feel I take from the power structure when I buy this and turn it into a necklace. Now, all of these charms are significant to me in some way or another, but this one I adore. It is a coin that the suffragettes damaged. Now, the suffragettes, we know that they went to jail and they did hunger strikes and they chained themselves to lampposts, but not many people know that they regularly did what they called outrages. Fantastic turn of phrase. It's somewhere between marching and bombing, basically. They'd just destroy things, or they'd undermine things, they'd undermine power structures. And what is more evidence of a power structure than money? So they would take coins and they would damage them. Now, on this one, what they've written is Votes for Women, and on the other side, WSPU, which is the Women's Social and Political Union. And then they put it back into circulation where it's now worthless. Now, ironically, these coins are worth quite a lot. So the suffragettes were trying to make them valueless, but in fact made them very valuable, proving women can't do maths. Now, why I love this is that it is a little bit of rebellion that I get to wear on my neck around this Victorian guard chain. Something that a man who wore this guard chain would probably be very furious about. So I carry this with me all the time. And it is my little piece of a connection. It's like I'm holding hands with a suffragette and carrying on her work through podcasting, a medium she would no doubt disapprove of. This is a Cornish Sprite. My grandfather gave me this, and I only met my grandfather in the year 2013 because I am adopted. So at the end of 2012, I had never seen anybody biologically related to me. Now, I knew my birth mother's name, and it was a very unusual name. In fact, they wouldn't tell me her name because they said even her first name was identifying. Normally they'll tell you, like, she's called Mary, we can't tell you her last name unless you fill out all these forms, and then it gives her reciprocal rights. But when I asked for that, they said, oh no, her first name is identifying. And being Australian, I thought, oh my God, my birth mother is Germaine Greer. And I thought, well, at the time, she's done a lot for the sisterhood. As it turns out, she has since very much missed the turn-off. So I'm quite pleased that's not the case. Eventually, I met my grandfather, who was a real old Australian soldier from the Second World War. And when I saw him for the first time, I actually look exactly like my grandmother, who passed before I met him. And I thought, oh my God, he's in his 90s with a heart condition. I look exactly like his late wife. I mean, I may be the last thing he ever sees. I was terrified that I was going to kill him with a heart attack by walking into his house looking like his late wife, my grandmother. But when he saw me, he cried and he said, oh, thanks for finding us. And we talked, and he told me all of these stories that, for some of them, I felt like he hadn't really told other people in the family, because I was family but sort of not family. And when I left, I felt like there was a deep bond between us. And he told me things like, for example, when he met his wife, Audrey, who was my grandmother, she was on the ground and he was in the air, and they were doing Morse code to each other. He was 19 years of age, and it was his Second World War training. And they were tapping to each other. They hadn't seen each other. They first spoke to each other in Morse code. And he said, we spoke in Morse code all our lives. We didn't want the kids to know what we're talking about. We'd tap it out on the table. I mean, the man was delightful. Now, I'm so happy I got to meet him quite a few times before he died. I was so devastated when he died. I was so devastated. I thought, I've just got a grandfather back. I can't lose him. I was so sad. And I was so delighted that he'd given this to my birth mother to give to me. And his family were from Cornwall, and I live in the UK. So this, I feel, sitting on my mantelpiece, will always connect me with Grandfather Charles. So I made a movie last year which will be released soon. It's called Say My Name. And I have been writing film scripts for about 10 years. And I had come to the conclusion that film scripts that you wrote were never made. And then magically, somebody amazing picked up one of my film scripts and said they would like to shoot it in Wales. And it was a magical world where everything I had written in my bedroom suddenly came to life. And there was a character in it called Dec, short for Declan, played by the extraordinary Mark Bonner, who you will probably know as the rather terrifying best friend in Catastrophe. And he played the most sinister bad guy you can possibly imagine. And the art department, they were so beautiful, incredible art director called Julian, made a mnemonic, and this is relevant when you watch the film, you'll understand it, of a deck chair. And this was in a hotel room, and it was so beautiful, and it was just hidden there. It's a real Easter egg in the film. When you see the film, which you certainly will because it will be out soon, and I've written it, so you'll definitely be going. And at the end, I said, would I be able to buy it? And the art director came and slipped it into my bag and secretly gave it to me. So I will have this on my wall forever as one of my very favourite pieces of art, commissioned, especially because I wrote a movie and thought up some ideas which magically became true. This next object is my yoga mug. Now I use this in the morning to remind me to get into downward facing dog as soon as possible. Yoga really has changed my life. I genuinely do feel like I didn't understand before that you can't really be emotionally happy if you're not taking care of the furniture, your body. And I don't like exercise, gang. I don't know what to tell you. I've written about this quite extensively in my book. I think women get very screwed up by all the messages we get about our main worth being cosmetic, and then we sort of start to fear our body and we don't want to move it, we feel uncomfortable in it. Obviously not all women, hashtag not all women, but that does seem to be a trend based on the way that we are constantly pummeled by the billboards we walk past. Now, I had a revelation recently because I went into a theatre and they'd erected this huge billboard of me because the Guilty Feminist was going on there. And I thought, oh my God, I look amazing on that billboard. I can never live up to that. What if someone sees me under that billboard and goes, she doesn't really look like that? And I realised, if I can't live up to my own billboard, how the hell am I ever going to live up to the L'Oreal one with Jennifer Aniston on it? Obviously, no one is really a billboard. Even if you're the billboard, you're not the billboard. And what's wonderful about yoga is I'm not going to the gym to lose weight or to be tight and firm and to look like something. I'm going to yoga to breathe in, to breathe out, to move my body and to remind myself what my body is for. And recently, I didn't go to yoga for like 10 days. I was really busy, and about 2-week mark, my body was just demanding yoga. It's the first kind of exercise my body's wanted to do. And I went and got on the mat after 2 weeks, and it was like, the only way I can describe it, and I've written about this more in the book, but the only way I can describe it is it was like I was dating my body for the first time in years, and I hadn't seen it for 2 weeks because I'd been busy. And my body went, oh, there you are. Oh, I've missed you. And I have to now get on the mat because I feel like I'm dating my own body and getting to know it, because over the years, I think, I'm going to be honest with you, I've ghosted my body. I've ghosted my own body over the years, gang. I've just sort of tried to not look in mirrors very much and sort of caught myself in a shop window and gone, oh, I don't like the way I'm standing, or I don't like how this bit sits over my hip. And I'm now dating my own body. I highly recommend it. Yoga. So this is a very special piece of jewellery to me. This is my name in Arabic. And it was made for me by Steve Ali. Now, Steve Ali is a Syrian refugee. I met him doing a podcast for Timepiece. Timepiece is a time banking skill sharing app which connects refugees with local people so we can teach each other skills, because lots of refugees get disconnected from their community, especially before they get their working papers, and lots of local people also, we get disconnected and we think, oh God, I don't have enough friends, or I haven't seen anyone for a while. And so this app is amazing, and I thought, well, I'm going to have some refugees on my podcast, and then people who've heard refugees on the podcast talking about other things that aren't necessarily about being a refugee but about their other skills and their other passions, they're more likely to use this app. And so I contacted Timepiece, and Charlotte brought along a lovely young man who'd been an architecture student in Syria, and his name was Steve Ali. And he was great on the podcast. And afterwards I was chatting to him and I said, where are you living? And he said, well, I'm kind of sofa surfing, people that I met in the Calais jungle, which is a refugee camp in Calais. And I'm just waiting to get my papers. And I thought, well, that can't be very good. Firstly, he'd been in a war zone. Then he'd been in a dinghy crossing a sea that was, a dinghy for 8 people with 43 people in it and nearly died. Then he'd walked across various countries. He'd spent a year in the Calais jungle where he'd built a lot of the structures. He'd put out a lot of fires. He'd acted there as a firefighter. And then he'd got here in a sort of life-threatening, death-defying manner. And I thought, he needs a bed, So I said, well, look, actually, we're going away for 3 weeks. Would you like to mind our cats? And he said, oh, I love cats. I really miss my Syrian cats. And he came to stay. And we bonded. And I said, look, would you like to stay till the end of the year? And he said, actually, that would be really lovely. We've got a spare room. And then after that 3 months, I said, would you like to stay another 3 months? Because we were really kind of bonding and getting on, and I'd learnt so much from him. And I've learnt so much from Steve about perspective. But I also learn a lot about a sort of cross-cultural stuff. At one point, I was explaining to Steve that I was in a Christian cult when I was growing up, when I was a teenager. And he said, oh yeah, I went through that. I was in an Islamic cult. And I was making a cup of tea in the kitchen, and I was like, Islamic cult? What? And I turned around and I went, was it a nice Islamic cult, or was it sort of more of a death to the West one? And he laughed and he went, no. They used to take us into the mosque and make us watch Blue Planet. And I said, oh, so it was an Attenborough-based Islamic cult? And he went, yeah, very much so. And I was like, see, we share the same prophets all around the world in a way. And he said, no, it was really happy clappy. It was kind of like what we would think of as a Bible camp, but it was very, kind of culty. But it was all about how wonderful the creator was and, Wales, basically. So when I said I was in a Christian cult, you didn't go kind of a Westboro Baptist Church kind of deal or a Ku Klux Klan kind of thing. You just went, oh yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. Sort of lots of praying. Yeah, basically I spent my teenage years on my knees, but not in a good way. And he didn't think that for a second. But I'd kind of gone, oh my God, Islamic cult as a teenager, were you in an ISIS training camp? And he laughed so much, like we laughed for like half an hour, like we could not stop laughing at what I had perceived. And I realised, of course, well, I've been on a diet of Western media, but you can unlearn what you've learned. That's really easy, but you've got to get to know people. If every single person got to know one refugee, the refugee crisis would be over, because there aren't that many refugees compared to like the population of Europe. We could obviously take people in. If everybody knew a Steve, because Steve is gorgeous, he's kind and he's erudite and he's articulate and he's an amazing jeweler, and he can make you your name in Arabic on a necklace. And he learnt to be a jeweler in the Calais jungle. So we're starting to do Guilty Feminist events in Calais because they won't let us build any structures, but they can't stop us having shows and taking out artists and yoga teachers and bands and famous people who will bring cameras with them and that will bring funding and hopefully even change policy. So if you are somebody who can make something, who's got a band, if you're somebody who has influence, if you're somebody who can just tell a story, then please email calais@guiltyfeminist.com and see if you can get involved in our events. If you cannot do any of those things, but you would like to produce a show and go out there and walk around with a clipboard, please do that. If you would like to just volunteer, get involved, cook meals and distribute them, gather clothes together and distribute them, then please go to helprefugees.org. Either way, get involved, come out to Calais. It's only an hour away. If it was happening in Dover, we would be there. And it just doesn't cost much. There are car shares. There are ways to get involved. My last object is the Guilty Feminist book. Now, many of you will know the Guilty Feminist podcast. We've had over 50 million downloads, which is very exciting. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming to the live shows. And thank you for getting involved in a lot of the direct action that we've been doing. This book is my thoughts about feminism, guilty feminism, and the sort of feminism we need for the 21st century. One that understands our privilege and our abilities, as well as understanding our oppressions and marginalizations. One that says, hey, we don't just have to stand against something, we can stand for something. We can start inventing the sort of world we want to live in together as one big, engaged, happy, excited army. If you are ever looking for tribe and feeling like, look, I'm not perfect, I'm a feminist, but there are times I admit, turn over from the BBC4 documentary about suffragettes to watch 4 episodes back to back of Say Yes to the Dress. I've done it, I've lived it, gang. I'm not perfect. But this book is a way to exfoliate that stuff that doesn't matter and say we don't have to be perfect or some kind of example of a feminist that we've got in our head to make meaningful change in the world, to find connection with other human beings and start creating the sort of environment we want to live in. This book talks about microclimates, the sort of places where women and non-binary people can thrive and not just sit on the end of a panel full of men and go, ooh, I've got something to say, and get talked over. We can create new environments for ourselves and be the authors and architects and constructors of these things rather than trying to always fit into these sort of patriarchal ancient structures that were created by and for men. We also need to understand that there are times when there are men who have fewer privileges than we do. For example, I've talked about refugees today. It is not as simple as men versus women. I hope you enjoy this book, and I hope that it motivates you to act while also convening in a place where we can live with our hypocrisies and insecurities. That is my life in objects.